The alarm screamed through Proxima Station like a dying animal. Red lights flashed in every corridor, and the automated voice kept repeating the same message. All personnel to escape pods. This is not a drill. All personnel to escape pods. Lee. Tejo ignored the voice. He had work to finish. The reactor core hummed beneath his hands as he adjusted the cooling systems one more time. Sweat dripped from his forehead onto the control panel. The station shook again as more alien ships fired at the outer defenses. Through the thick glass window, he could see the last evacuation ship pulling away from the docking bay. Tejo, get out of there. The voice crackled through his headset. It was Kim Sora, the station commander. Her ship was already moving toward the jump point. The reactor will hold without you. No, it won't, Tejo said quietly. He kept his eyes on, the numbers scrolling across his screen. The cooling system is damaged. If I leave now, the core will overload in 6 hours. The explosion will reach New Sol Colony. That's not your problem anymore. Tejo smiled sadly. New Sol was his home. His sister, Park Minna, lived there with her 2 children. His parents ran a small restaurant near the spaceport. 3 million people called that colony home. Yes, it is my problem, he said. The headset went silent. Sora's ship had jumped to safety. Tejo worked alone in the humming chamber. He was a small man, even for a human. 34 years old, with calloused hands and quiet eyes. He had spent 12 years working in the deep asteroid mines before coming to Proxima Station. He knew machines better than people, and he understood that someone had to stay. The station shook harder. Through the reactor chamber's cameras, Tejo watched alien soldiers break through the main airlock. They moved like insects, all sharp, angles and chittering sounds. Their skin looked like polished black stone, and they wore mechanical suits that made them twice as tall as a human. The Vorthak had arrived. Tejo had heard stories about them. They came from the dark edge of the galaxy, taking whole worlds as slaves. They were smart, organized, and completely without mercy. No one had ever escaped their prison ships. But Tejo wasn't thinking about escape. He was thinking about the reactor. The aliens moved through the station quickly. They knew exactly where to go, which meant they had been watching human colonies for a long time. Tejo heard their metal feet clanging in the corridors above him. Soon they would reach the reactor level. He finished the last adjustment and stepped back. The cooling system would hold for maybe 2 weeks. Long enough for a rescue ship to arrive and evacuate New Sol if needed. Long enough for his sacrifice to mean something. The chamber door hissed open. 3 Vorthak soldiers stood in the doorway. Up close, they looked even more frightening. Their black eyes reflected the reactor's blue light, and their mechanical suits hummed with power. Energy weapons hung from their belts like sleeping serpents. The lead soldier stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice came through a translator device attached to its throat. The words sounded flat and emotionless. Human, you will surrender. Tejo raised his hands slowly. He made his face look scared and defeated. Inside, his mind was working. The soldiers' suits were heavy, built for intimidation rather than speed. Their weapons looked powerful but clumsy, and they stood too close together, like they had never fought an enemy that might fight back. Please don't hurt me, Tejo said. He made his voice shake. The lead soldier made a sound that might have been laughter. Humans are weak. You will serve the Empire well. They put metal restraints on Tejo's wrists. The cuffs were designed for Vorthak anatomy and felt loose on his smaller human hands. Another oversight. The aliens seemed to think all intelligent species were built like them. They marched him through the station toward their landing ship. Tejo kept his head down, but his eyes open. He counted 17 soldiers in the boarding party. Their ship sat in the main docking bay like a black metal spider. It was sleek and dangerous looking, but Tejo noticed the weapon ports were all facing outward. They weren't expecting trouble from their prisoners. The ship's interior was built for beings much taller than humans. Tejo had to duck his head in some corridors. The walls were covered in symbols he couldn't read, but he memorized their patterns anyway. Knowledge was survival in the asteroid mines. It would be survival here, too. They locked him in a small cage near the ship's engine room. The bars were made of some alien metal that felt warm to the touch, strong enough to hold a Vorthak, which meant more than strong enough to hold a human, or so the aliens thought. The ship lifted off smoothly. Through a small window in his cage, Tejo watched Proxima Station shrink away. His home for the past 3 years disappeared into the darkness of space. He felt a moment of sadness, then pushed it away. Emotions were luxury he couldn't afford. Other cages lined the corridor. Most were empty, but Tejo could see a few other prisoners. They looked like refugees from a dozen different worlds. All of them sat quietly, their eyes empty of hope. A Vorthak soldier approached his cage. This one wore different markings on its armor. An officer, maybe. "I am Commander Keltar," it said through its translator. "You are the first human we have captured. Your species interests us." "Why?" Tejo asked. He kept his voice small and frightened. "Your worlds are rich but poorly defended. Your people seem soft, built for comfort rather than war. The Empire can use such slaves." Tejo nodded as if he understood. "Are you taking me to your homeworld?" "To a processing station first. We must study human physiology before beginning. The harvest of your species." Keltar leaned closer to the bars. "You should feel honored. The data we gather from you will help us conquer your entire civilization more efficiently." "I see," Tejo said quietly. The commander made that laughing sound again and walked away. Alone in his cage, Tejo began to examine his prison. The lock was electronic, probably keyed to Vorthak biological signatures. The bars were indeed very strong, but they were welded at the joints rather than forged as single pieces. The alien welding technique created tiny stress points that wouldn't matter to most prisoners. But Tejo wasn't most prisoners. He had spent years working with metal, in high-pressure environments. He knew how to find weaknesses. The ship hummed around him as it jumped through hyperspace. Based on the engine vibrations, they were traveling fast but not in a straight line. Multiple jumps, probably to confuse anyone trying to track them. Smart. Tejo settled back against the rear wall of his cage and closed his eyes. To any watching guard, he looked defeated and exhausted. In reality, he was thinking, the Vorthak thought they had captured a weak, frightened engineer from a soft species. They planned to study him, then use what they learned to enslave humanity. They saw him as the first step in conquering his people. They had no idea what humans were really capable of. They didn't know that Tejo's homeworld had gravity twice, as strong as their own, or that he had spent years working in conditions that would kill most aliens. They didn't know that his soft species had evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill them. Most importantly, they didn't know that leaving Tejo alive was the biggest mistake they would ever make. The ship jumped again, carrying him deeper into Vorthak space. Tejo opened his eyes and looked at the welded joints holding his cage together. Give him time, and he could break those welds with his bare hands. Time was something he had plenty of. The Vorthak thought they had won, by capturing him. Soon they would learn how wrong they were. The prison ship traveled for 8 days before reaching its destination. Tejo spent the time watching and learning. He counted guard rotations, memorized the ship's daily schedule, and listened to the aliens talk among themselves. Their translator devices worked both ways, so he caught fragments of their conversations. The Vorthak were excited about their human prisoner. They called him a prototype and discussed the slave potential of his species. They talked about human worlds like farmers, discussing ripe fruit ready for harvest. Tejo said nothing. He ate the tasteless food they gave him and pretended to sleep when they watched him. But inside he was building a map of everything he saw and heard. On the 9th day, the ship docked at a massive space station. Through his small window, Tejo could see it was built like a metal city floating in space. Docking bays covered its surface like open mouths, and ships came and went constantly. This wasn't just a prison. It was a processing center for the entire Vorthak slave trade. They moved him from the ship in a transport cage that floated above the floor. The station's corridors were wide and tall, filled with aliens of dozens, of different species. Most wore the metal collars of slaves. They kept their eyes down as the Vorthak guards passed. Teho saw creatures that looked like walking crystals, others that seemed to be made of living water, and being so strange he couldn't even guess what planet they came from. All of them moved with the slow, defeated pace of broken spirits. The transport cage stopped at a medical facility deep inside the station. The walls here were white and sterile, like a hospital, but the restraint tables and scanning devices looked more like torture equipment. They transferred Teho to a holding cell with thick, transparent walls. The cell was small but clean, with a sleeping pad and basic facilities. It reminded him of the isolation chambers in deep space mining stations, except this one was designed to keep him in rather than keep danger out. A Vorthak in medical robes approached his cell. This alien was different from the soldiers, smaller and less armored with additional cybernetic implants covering its head. When it spoke, its voice was higher pitched and more curious. "I am Dr. Rixkan, chief xenobiologist of this facility. You are my new research subject." "What are you going to do to me?" Teho asked. He made his voice shake with fear. "Nothing harmful, initially. I need to understand human physiology before we can determine your species' optimal use as laborers. Blood samples, tissue scans, strength tests. All quite standard." The doctor activated a scanner outside Teho's cell. Red light washed over him from head to toe. Dr. Rixkan studied the readings with obvious interest. "Fascinating. Your bone density is much higher than expected, and your muscle structure is remarkably compact." The alien made notes on a digital tablet. "Your homeworld must have strong gravity." "I suppose," Teho said quietly. "What is your occupation on this homeworld?" "I work in mines, deep space mining platforms." Dr. Rixkan made more notes. "Ah, that explains the increased bone density, constant exposure to high-stress environments. Still, these readings are unusual even for a laborer." Over the following days, Dr. Rixkan ran test after test. He took blood samples and was surprised by how quickly Teho's wounds healed. He measured reaction times and was puzzled by how fast humans could move. He tested grip strength and had to recalibrate his equipment twice. "Your species is stronger than our initial estimates suggested," the doctor admitted during one session. "Not significantly, but enough to affect optimal work assignments." Teho just nodded. He didn't mention that he was small and weak by human standards. He didn't explain that 12 years in low-gravity mining platforms had actually made him weaker than most humans. The Vorthak were discovering his diminished capabilities and thinking they represented peak human performance. Between testing sessions, they allowed him exercise time in a larger chamber. Other prisoners were there too, moving slowly through basic physical routines under guard supervision. Teho recognized some of the species from the corridors. An alien that looked like living crystal approached him during his second exercise period. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes. "You are new here. I am Velthan of the Crystalline Collective. What species are you?" "Human." "My name is Teho. How long have you been here?" "4 of your solar cycles. My people were conquered when I was young. I have served the Vorthak most of my life." The crystal being moved closer, its faceted body catching the chamber's artificial light. "You should know. Resistance is impossible. The guards' weapons will kill you before you take 3 steps. Teho nodded thoughtfully. "I'm not planning to resist, I just want to survive." But as the days passed, Teho began teaching the other prisoners anyway. He disguised it as exercise routines from his homeworld. Simple stretches that were actually martial arts forms. Breathing techniques that built core strength. Balance. Exercises that improved reaction time. The Vorthak guards watched but didn't interfere. To them it looked like harmless physical therapy. They had no concept of unarmed combat. Their species had developed technology to handle all their fighting needs thousands of years ago. A water being called HFY joined their informal exercise group. Its translucent blue body flowed like liquid, but it could solidify parts of itself for manipulation tasks. "Why do you teach us these movements?" HFY asked one day, its voice bubbling like a stream. "Because staying strong keeps us alive longer," Teho replied. "And because everyone deserves hope." The Vorthak are too powerful. Their technology makes resistance impossible. Tejo continued his stretching routine, moving through forms that looked like simple flexibility exercises but were actually combat training. Technology is just tools. It's only as good as the beings using it. During his medical sessions, Tejo learned more about his captors. Dr. Rixcon was talkative, proud of his work, and happy to explain Vorthak society to his research subject. "We are the most advanced species in this galaxy," the doctor said while taking another blood sample. "We conquered physical weakness through technology long ago. Our exoskeletons make us strong. Our weapons make us deadly. Our ships make us mobile. We have evolved beyond the crude limitations of biology." "That sounds wonderful," Tejo said admiringly. "Indeed. Primitive species like yours still struggle with the basic challenges of survival. You are strong because you must be, not because you choose to be. We are strong because we have transcended such crude necessities." Tejo asked innocent questions about Vorthak technology and culture. Dr. Rixcon answered them eagerly, pleased to have such an interested audience. The alien had no idea he was giving away vital intelligence to someone who understood exactly how to use it. The Vorthak came from a low-gravity world with a gentle atmosphere. They had developed advanced technology early in their evolution and used it to conquer their environment completely. For thousands of years, they had faced no real challenges or threats. Their exoskeletons weren't just tools, they were crutches. Without them, the aliens were physically weaker than human children. Their weapons were powerful but required complex targeting systems because their natural reflexes were slow. Their ships were marvels of engineering, but operated by beings who had never learned to think quickly under pressure. They were a species that had forgotten how to fight. "Your people sound very wise," Tejo told Dr. Rixcon, after learning about Vorthak military doctrine. "Using intelligence instead of brute force." "Exactly, you understand. This is why some species can be educated to serve us effectively. Your race shows promise." After 3 weeks of testing, Dr. Rixcon announced that Tejo's evaluation was complete. The next day, he would be transferred to a transport ship bound for the Vorthak homeworld. There, he would be presented to the High Command as an example of human slave potential. That night, alone in his cell, Tejo finally made his first move. The transparent wall of his cell was strong, designed to contain aliens much more powerful than humans. But it was held in place by metal brackets welded to the station's framework. Tejo had been studying those welds for weeks, noting the stress patterns and weak points. He pressed his hands against one bracket and pushed, slowly, carefully, using techniques learned from years of precision demolition work. He applied pressure at exactly the right angle. The weld cracked silently. Tejo smiled in the darkness. The Vorthak had learned a lot about human biology over the past 3 weeks. They knew how strong his bones were, how fast his reflexes worked, how quickly he healed. But they still had no idea what humans were really capable of. The transport ship that carried Tejo to the Vorthak homeworld was magnificent. 3 times larger than the prison ship, it had polished metal halls and viewing windows that showed the stars streaming past at faster-than-light speeds. This was a vessel designed to impress, not just transport. Tejo rode in a luxurious prisoner compartment instead of a cage. The Vorthak had cleaned him, given him new clothes, and even provided better food. They wanted their prize specimen to look healthy when they presented him to the High Command. Commander Keltar visited him daily during the journey. The alien seemed proud of his successful capture and eager to talk about Vorthak plans for humanity. "Your species will be valuable to the Empire," Keltar said during one visit. Dr. Rixcon's tests show that humans are stronger than many slave races, but not strong enough to be dangerous. Perfect for heavy labor. "I see," Tejo replied. He kept his voice respectful and curious. "How many human worlds will you conquer? All of them eventually. Our scouts have identified 47 human colonies within practical transport range. We estimate a total population of 12 billion potential slaves." Tejo nodded as if this impressed him. "That's a lot of people." "Indeed, the largest single addition to our workforce in over 2 centuries. Keltar activated a holographic display showing the Vorthak Empire. Hundreds of star systems glowed with the mark of conquest. Each species serves according to its abilities. The crystal people work in our communication centers. The water beings maintain our atmospheric processors. Humans will be assigned to construction and mining operations. What about the other species that resist? Keltar made that laughing sound. Resistance is brief and pointless. We have conquered 17 different civilizations. Our military has never failed to subdue a target species within one standard cycle. The alien showed him more displays. Vorthak battle fleets, each one containing thousands of ships. Orbital bombardment systems that could crack planets. Manufacturing centers that produced weapons and equipment at incredible rates. How do you coordinate such massive forces? Tejo asked innocently. Central command from the homeworld, naturally. All fleet movements, all invasion schedules, all resource allocation decisions flow through the high command complex. It is the most efficient system possible. Tejo memorized every detail of the tactical displays. The Vorthak military was indeed impressive, but it was also rigid and centralized. Everything depended on orders from above. Field commanders had little independence or initiative, another weakness to file away. On the 8th day of travel, they arrived at the Vorthak homeworld. Through his compartment's viewing window, Tejo saw a planet that looked like a single massive city. Metal towers reached from the surface all the way into orbit, connected by bridges and transport tubes. The sky was filled with flying vehicles, moving in perfect orderly patterns. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. They docked at the largest orbital platform Tejo had ever seen. The structure was so enormous that it generated its own artificial gravity. Millions of beings moved through its corridors, mostly Vorthak, but with representatives of every slave species scattered among them. Tejo was transferred to another luxury transport that carried him down to the planet's surface. The High Command complex occupied an entire continent, its gleaming towers rising higher than mountains. This was the heart of an empire that spanned half the galaxy. They brought him to a preparation chamber, where Vorthak technicians dressed him in formal clothing and attached a translation device to his throat. The translator was more advanced than the ones he'd seen before, designed to make his speech sound more sophisticated and formal. "Remember," Commander Keltar told him, "you are being presented as a representative of your entire species. Your behavior will determine how the High Command views all humans." "I understand," Tejo replied. "I will not disappoint you." The presentation chamber was vast, with a domed ceiling that showed real-time images of Vorthak fleets throughout the galaxy. 50 High Command officers sat in curved rows around a central platform. At the highest seat sat High Commander Vexthul, an ancient Vorthak whose exoskeleton was covered in decorations marking thousands of successful conquests. Tejo was led to the center of the platform. Standing lights illuminated him from all directions, making him feel like a specimen under a microscope, which he realized was exactly what he was. Commander Keltar presented his report with obvious pride. He described the successful raid on Proxima Station, the capture of the human specimen, and Dr. Rixcan's research findings. "The species shows ideal slave characteristics," Keltar concluded. "Sufficient intelligence for complex tasks, adequate physical strength, and most importantly, natural compliance when faced with superior power." High Commander Vexthul studied Tejo with ancient, calculating eyes. When the old alien spoke, his voice carried the authority of absolute power. "Human, you understand why you are here?" "Yes, Your Excellence," Tejo replied. He kept his voice steady and respectful. "I am to represent my species before your wisdom. Indeed, we have observed your people for some time. Your worlds are rich, your defenses weak, your population large. You would serve the Empire well as laborers." "We would be honored to serve, Your Excellence." A murmur of approval ran through the assembled officers. Here was a human who understood the natural order, that the strong ruled and the weak served. "Tell us about your species' capabilities," Vexthul commanded. "Can humans work in dangerous environments? How do they respond to discipline? What is their normal lifespan under optimal conditions?" Tejo answered each question carefully. He described humans as moderately strong, reasonably intelligent, and naturally obedient to authority. He made them sound like ideal slaves, capable, enough to be useful but not strong enough to be threatening. The High Command ate it up. "Excellent," Vexthul said when the questioning was finished. "Commander Keltar, your capture of this specimen has provided valuable intelligence. The invasion fleet will launch within 10 cycles." Tejo felt his heart skip, but kept his expression calm. 10 cycles, about 20 days in human time. "How many ships will you send, Your Excellence?" he asked humbly. 3,000 vessels in the primary fleet, with support elements bringing the total to over 4,000. The largest invasion force we have assembled in 50 cycles. The holographic displays around the chamber lit up, showing the massive fleet gathered in hidden staging areas throughout Vorthak space. Battleships the size of cities, carrier vessels packed with fighter craft, troop transports designed to carry millions of soldiers. "Your homeworld Earth will be the first target," Vexthul continued. "Once we control your species' origin point, the remaining colonies will surrender without significant resistance." "Earth's defenses are not strong," Tejo said quietly. "But there are military bases on other worlds they might try to fight. Let them. Resistance will only demonstrate the futility of opposing the Empire. Your fellow humans will learn obedience more quickly after witnessing the consequences of defiance." The presentation continued for another hour. The High Command discussed invasion logistics, slave processing procedures, and resource extraction schedules. They talked about humanity's future as if humans were livestock being prepared for slaughter. Through it all, Tejo nodded and appeared impressed by their power. Inside, he was memorizing every detail of their plans. Finally, High Commander Vexthul declared the session concluded. "This human will be kept in comfort until the invasion begins. When Earth falls, he will broadcast surrender messages to encourage cooperation from his species." "A wise plan, Your Excellence," Tejo said, bowing respectfully. They escorted him to luxurious quarters in the High Command complex. The rooms were beautiful, filled with art and technology from across the galaxy. But the doors were locked and the windows were barred. A comfortable prison was still a prison. That night, as Tejo sat in his golden cage, he thought about everything he had learned. The Vorthak invasion fleet was indeed massive and powerful. Their technology was advanced beyond anything humans possessed. Their military experience stretched back over centuries of conquest. By every logical measure, humanity didn't stand a chance. But the Vorthak had made one critical error. They thought they understood humans based on studying one mining engineer from a remote station. They had no idea that Tejo represented the absolute bottom of human physical capability, not the top. They didn't know that Earth's gravity was twice as strong as their homeworlds. They didn't know that human children routinely survived conditions that would kill adult Vorthak. They didn't know that humanity had evolved on a planet where everything, the weather, the animals, the geology, even the plants, tried to kill them every single day. Most importantly, they didn't know that their centralized command structure, their rigid hierarchy, and their dependence on technology made them incredibly vulnerable to the right kind of attack. Tejo looked out through his barred window at the Vorthak capital with its ordered perfection and technological marvels. In 20 days, 4,000 warships would depart to enslave his species. He smiled in the darkness. The Vorthak thought they had won by capturing him. They thought he was proof of human weakness. Soon, they would discover their mistake. But by then, it would be far too late. Tejo spent 3 days studying his luxurious prison. The rooms were designed for Vorthak anatomy, with high ceilings and wide doorways. The furniture was elegant, but built for beings much taller and more slender than humans. Everything was smooth, polished, and completely free of sharp edges. A civilization that had forgotten that the universe could be dangerous. The locks on his doors were electronic, keyed to Vorthak biosignatures. The windows were made of transparent metal stronger than steel, designed to withstand orbital bombardment. His quarters were located on the 73rd floor of the High Command Tower with a 3-kilometer drop to the city below. To the Vorthak, these were perfect prison conditions. No possible escape. They had never met a human before. On the fourth night, Taeho made his move. The building's ventilation system was designed for optimal air circulation, with large ducts that could easily accommodate a Vorthak's tall, thin frame. The engineers had never considered that an escaped prisoner might use them. Taeho removed the ventilation grate in his bedroom using the metal eating utensils from his dinner tray. The screws were designed for specialized tools, but human fingernails were harder than Vorthak claws. It took patience, but he had learned patience in the asteroid mines. The ductwork was smooth and well-maintained, extending throughout the entire tower complex. Taeho crawled through it slowly, following maintenance diagrams he had memorized from wall displays in the corridors. The Vorthak posted their building schematics openly, another sign of a species that had never faced real threats. His first target was the tower's environmental control center. Every building on the Vorthak homeworld was perfectly climate-controlled, maintaining the exact temperature and humidity that their species required. But what was comfortable for Vorthak was cool for humans. Taeho found the control center on the 40th floor. 2 technicians worked the night shift, monitoring atmospheric conditions throughout the tower. They never saw him coming. Moving through the darkened ductwork, Taeho positioned himself above the first technician's workstation. When the alien walked beneath him, Taeho dropped through the grate. The Vorthak never had a chance to cry out. Human hands, strengthened by years of heavy labor, closed around the alien's throat. The technician's exoskeleton cracked like an eggshell under pressure. It was never designed to withstand. The second technician heard the noise and turned around. Its 6 eyes widened in shock as it saw the human standing over its colleague's body. "Impossible," it whispered. "You are in maximum security detention." "Not anymore," Taeho said quietly. The alien reached for an alarm button. Taeho crossed the room in 2 quick steps, moving faster than Vorthak reflexes could track. Another brief struggle, another cracked exoskeleton. Alone in the control center, Taeho examined the environmental systems. The Vorthak had built everything with typical efficiency and typical overconfidence. Central controls for the entire tower, automated systems that responded to simple commands, and no security locks because no prisoner had ever escaped before. Taeho began making adjustments. The tower's normal temperature was kept at exactly 18 degrees Celsius, perfect for Vorthak comfort. Taeho raised it to 25 degrees. The humidity, normally maintained at 30%, went up to 60%. The air circulation rate increased by 20%. To humans, the changes were barely noticeable. To Vorthak, it would feel like trying to breathe underwater. Then Taeho tackled the gravity generators. The tower used artificial gravity to maintain the comfortable 6G that Vorthak preferred. Their homeworld was a light gravity planet and their bodies were built accordingly. Taeho found the gravity controls and made a small adjustment. The tower's gravity increased from 0.6G to 0.8G, still well below Earth normal, but 30% higher than what the Vorthak were used to. Within hours, every alien in the building would be feeling the strain. Within days, they would be exhausted. His next target was the communication center. The High Command coordinated their empire through a vast network of subspace transmitters and quantum relays. The system was incredibly sophisticated, capable of sending messages across thousands of light-years instantly. It was also completely unguarded. The Vorthak had never considered that their communication system might be vulnerable to internal attack. Who would want to sabotage it? All their slaves wore control collars. All their citizens were loyal. All their prisoners were securely contained. Taeho spent 2 hours in the communication center, working with equipment he had never seen before. But the basic principles were the same as the mining platform systems he knew. Power inputs, signal processors, transmission arrays, all following logical patterns. He didn't destroy anything. That would be noticed too quickly. Instead, he made subtle modifications to the message routing protocols. Communications would still work, but with tiny delays. Error correction systems would run extra verification cycles. Priority flags would be randomly reassigned. The entire Vorthak command network would slow down by just a few %. Not enough to notice immediately, but enough to create confusion when split-second timing mattered. From the communication center, Taeho moved to the tower's computer core. Here he found detailed files on the invasion fleet, ship positions, supply schedules, commander profiles, tactical plans, everything the High Command needed to coordinate their attack on humanity, and everything Taeho needed to destroy them. He couldn't access the files directly. They were protected by encryption that would take years to break. But he didn't need to read them. He just needed to corrupt them. Using techniques learned from salvaging damaged mining equipment, Taeho introduced subtle errors into the data storage systems. Navigation coordinates shifted by tiny amounts. Supply delivery schedules moved by a few hours. Personnel records were scrambled just enough to create doubt about who was assigned where. Again, nothing that would be noticed immediately. But when the invasion began and thousands of ships tried to coordinate their movements, chaos would follow. The sun was rising over the Vorthak capital when Taeho finished his work in the computer core. He had been moving through the tower for 6 hours, and soon the morning shift would discover the bodies in the environmental center. But he wasn't done yet. The tower's power grid was his final target. The Vorthak used fusion reactors to provide clean, abundant energy for their city-sized buildings. The reactors were marvels of engineering, completely automated, perfectly safe, and utterly reliable. They were also vulnerable to someone who understood how fusion systems worked. Taeho had spent 12 years working around power systems in the asteroid mines. He knew that fusion reactors were incredibly stable under normal conditions, but they relied on precise magnetic field configurations to contain their plasma. If those fields were destabilized in just the right way, he didn't want to destroy the reactor. That would kill millions of innocent slaves throughout the city, but he could make it unreliable. Working carefully in the reactor control room, Taeho adjusted the magnetic field generators by microscopic amounts. The changes were within normal operational parameters, but they introduced tiny instabilities into the containment system. The reactor would still work, but it would require constant attention from technicians. Power fluctuations would ripple through the building systems. Computer networks would experience random shutdowns. Environmental controls would malfunction at unpredictable intervals. By the time Taeho crawled back through the ventilation system to his quarters, the entire High Command Tower was running on slowly degrading systems. Nothing catastrophic, nothing that would cause immediate alarm, but hundreds of small problems that would multiply into major headaches over the coming days. He replaced the ventilation grate in his bedroom and climbed into bed just as the morning shift discovered the dead technicians in the environmental center. The alarm klaxons began wailing throughout the tower. Through his window, Taeho could see security forces swarming the building. They sealed off the environmental center and began searching for intruders. They never thought to check on the human prisoner sleeping peacefully in his locked room 73 floors above. A few hours later, Commander Keltar visited Taeho's quarters. The alien looked tired and stressed, which wasn't surprising given that the building's gravity had increased and the air had become uncomfortably warm and humid. There was a security incident last night, Keltar said, breathing heavily from the climb up to Taeho's floor. The elevators had been malfunctioning all morning due to power fluctuations. I'm sorry to hear that, Taeho replied, looking concerned. I hope no one was hurt. 2 technicians were killed by an unknown intruder. We are conducting a full investigation. That's terrible. Do you know who did it? Keltar studied Taeho carefully. The human looked exactly as he always did. Small, harmless, and slightly frightened by the presence of Vorthak authority. We suspect it was a saboteur from one of the slave species, someone with technical knowledge and physical capability. I see. Will this affect the invasion plans? Of course not. A minor incident cannot delay the conquest of an entire species. But Keltar's voice carried less confidence than his words. The tower systems had been malfunctioning all day, and the investigation was proceeding slowly due to equipment failures. After the commander left, Taeho returned to his comfortable chair by the window over the following week. The problems in the High Command Tower grew worse. Power fluctuations became more frequent. Communication delays stretched longer. Environmental systems struggled to maintain proper conditions while fighting Taeho's subtle sabotage. The Vorthak engineering teams worked frantically to fix each problem as it appeared. but they were fighting symptoms rather than causes. Every repair they made was undermined by the microscopic changes Tejo had introduced to their core systems. Commander Keltar visited daily, looking more exhausted each time. The alien's exoskeleton showed stress fractures from dealing with the increased gravity, and its breathing was labored from the thicker, more humid air. The investigation continues, Keltar reported during one visit. We have found no trace of the intruder who killed our technicians. Perhaps they escaped the building, Tejo suggested helpfully. Impossible. The tower was sealed immediately, after the bodies were discovered. The intruder must still be inside somewhere. Tejo nodded sympathetically. I hope you find them soon. This must be very stressful for you. What Keltar didn't know was that the stress was about to get much worse. On the 10th day, Tejo made his second move. The tower's main computer core contained not just tactical data for the invasion fleet, but also the central communication hub for the entire Vorthak Empire. Every message, every order, every piece of intelligence flowed through this system. It was time to use that against them. Late at night, Tejo crawled through the ventilation system once again. This time, his target was the communication array on the tower's roof. The massive dish antenna could reach every Vorthak ship in the galaxy, transmitting orders at the speed of light across impossible distances. The array was guarded, but the guards were tired and distracted by the building's ongoing problems. Their night vision equipment kept malfunctioning due to power fluctuations, and the increased gravity made their patrol routes exhausting. Tejo waited until both guards were on the far side of the roof, then dropped silently from an air vent near the main transmitter. The communication equipment was sophisticated beyond anything humans had developed, but its basic principles were familiar. Working quickly, Tejo accessed the transmitter's control systems. He didn't try to break the encryption or decode the messages flowing through it. Instead, he added his own signal to the stream, a simple, unencrypted transmission that would be broadcast to every Vorthak ship in space. The message was short and delivered in perfect, unaccented Vorthak. Tejo had learned their language during his months in captivity, though he had been careful never to let them know. This is Lee Tejo of the human species, speaking from the High Command Tower on your homeworld. I want every Vorthak in your fleet to know that you have made a terrible mistake. He paused, letting that sink in throughout their entire military structure. You captured me because you thought I was weak. You studied me because you thought I represented typical human capabilities. You are preparing to invade my species because you believe we will be easy to conquer. Another pause. You are wrong about everything. I am not weak. I am one of the smallest and least physically capable humans you could have found. I am not typical. I have been weakened by years of work in low-gravity environments, and my species is not easy to conquer. We are survivors, from a world that makes your homeworld look like a paradise. Tejo's voice remained calm and conversational, as if he were explaining mining procedures to a new worker. I have been inside your most secure facility for months. I have walked through your command center undetected. I have sabotaged your systems, killed your personnel, and corrupted your invasion plans. I am one small human, working alone, with no weapons except my bare hands. The transmission continued broadcasting across the Vorthak fleet, reaching every ship simultaneously. You have 4,000 warships preparing to attack my homeworld. You believe this force is unstoppable, but you are about to face 40 billion humans who are stronger, faster, and more dangerous than I am. You are about to fight a species that evolved on a planet with twice your gravity, where the oceans are filled with predators and the land is covered with poisonous plants. Tejo finished his message with quiet confidence. My name is Lee Tejo. I am a mining engineer from Proxima Station. I am one ordinary human, and I am telling you to turn around and go home, because what happens next will be your choice, but it will not be your victory. The transmission ended. Throughout the Vorthak fleet, thousands of commanders stared at their communication screens in shock and disbelief. The response was immediate and panicked. Emergency channels flooded with reports and questions. Ship commanders demanded confirmation. Fleet admirals called for security sweeps. The entire invasion force descended into chaos as they tried to understand how a supposedly helpless prisoner had broadcast from the heart of their empire. In the high command tower, alarms screamed as security forces traced the transmission to their own roof. They found the communication array still warm from use, but no sign of the broadcaster. The guards swore that no one had approached the equipment, but the evidence was undeniable. High Commander Vexthul himself arrived within an hour, his ancient exoskeleton whining under the strain of the building's increased gravity. He was accompanied by a full security detail and the Empire's top technical specialists. "Find the human," Vexthul ordered. "Scan every room, every corridor, every ventilation shaft. He must still be in the building." But when they checked Teho's quarters, they found him sleeping peacefully in his bed. The door lock showed no signs of tampering. The windows were intact. The ventilation grate appeared untouched. Vexthul stood in the doorway, staring at the sleeping human with growing confusion and anger. "Wake him," he commanded. The guards shook Teho awake. He sat up slowly, blinking in confusion at the crowd of armed aliens in his bedroom. "Your Excellence?" Teho asked, recognizing the High Commander. "What's wrong?" Someone broadcast a message. "From our communication array," Vexthul said coldly. "The transmission claimed to be from you." Teho looked genuinely puzzled. "From me? But I've been locked in these rooms for days. How could I broadcast anything?" "That is what we intend to discover." They searched Teho's quarters thoroughly, looking for any sign of how he might have escaped and returned. They found nothing. The room's security systems showed no anomalies. The locks had not been opened. The windows had not been breached. Meanwhile, reports kept flooding in from the fleet. The humans' transmission had been heard throughout their entire military structure. Ship crews were asking questions about invasion security. Some commanders were requesting clarification of their orders. A few were even suggesting that the mission should be postponed pending further investigation. "Impossible," Vexthul muttered, as he stared at Teho. "You cannot have left this room." "I agree, Your Excellence," Teho said respectfully. "Perhaps the transmission was faked, or maybe another human is already on your homeworld." The suggestion sent shockwaves through the Fourth Command structure. If other humans had infiltrated their capital, if their security had been compromised to this extent, then their entire empire might be vulnerable. Over the following days, paranoia spread through the Vorthak leadership like a plague. Security sweeps became more frequent and more intrusive. Trust between commanders eroded as they wondered who might be compromised. The smooth efficiency of their empire began to fracture under the weight of suspicion and fear. The invasion fleet's departure was delayed by 3 days, while investigators tried to determine how the transmission had been made. When they couldn't find answers, it was delayed again. Teho watched the chaos unfold from his comfortable prison, occasionally offering helpful suggestions to his increasingly frantic guards. He appeared genuinely concerned about the security breach and eager to assist with the investigation. Nobody suspected that the helpful prisoner was the cause of all their problems. On the 14th day after his first sabotage mission, Teho received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Rixkhan arrived looking haggard and exhausted, his medical equipment cases clutched tightly in his cybernetic arms. "I have been ordered to perform additional tests," the doctor explained. "The High Command wants to verify that you are indeed who you claim to be." "Of course, Doctor. I'm happy to cooperate." But as Dr. Rixkhan set up his scanning equipment, Teho noticed something interesting. The alien's hands were shaking, not from fear but from physical exhaustion. The increased gravity and environmental stress were taking their toll on all the Vorthak in the tower. "Perfect. Doctor," Teho said conversationally as the scans began, "you look tired. Have you been working extra hours because of the security problems?" "The entire scientific staff has been reassigned to investigation duties," Dr. Rixkhan admitted. "We are trying to determine how the transmission was made, and whether there might be other humans hidden on our world. That must be very stressful." "Indeed. And the building's environmental systems have been malfunctioning for days. The air is too thick, the gravity too heavy, the temperature too warm. My staff can barely function under these conditions." Teho nodded sympathetically. Perhaps it's sabotage? If there really are other humans on your world, they might be T. 3 more days passed in chaos. The Vorthak security forces had torn the High Command Tower apart looking for infiltrators. They had found nothing except more evidence of systematic sabotage, subtle damage to systems throughout the building, all requiring the kind of technical knowledge that should have been impossible for a prisoner to possess. The invasion fleet remained in standby, its commanders paralyzed by conflicting reports and unclear orders. Some wanted to proceed with the attack on humanity. Others demanded a complete investigation before moving forward. A few suggested that the entire invasion should be cancelled until they could determine how their security had been compromised. Hi. Commander Vexthal called an emergency meeting of his top advisors. They gathered in the tower's main briefing room, a circular chamber with holographic displays showing the status of their empire. Taeho watched through the building's internal camera system, which he had learned to access during his midnight excursions. The situation is unacceptable, Vexthal declared, his ancient voice cracking with frustration. We have been made to appear weak and vulnerable. Our own fleet questions our competence. Fleet Admiral Kethvar, commander of the invasion force, spoke first. The humans' transmission has spread throughout our military. Ship crews are asking why our most secure facility could be penetrated so easily. Some are wondering what other surprises this species might have prepared for us. Then we demonstrate our strength, suggested General Mortok, head of ground forces. Launch the invasion immediately. Show the fleet that no primitive species can intimidate the Empire. With what? Dr. Rixcon interrupted. He looked terrible, exhausted by days of investigation and the building's hostile environment. Our tactical data has been corrupted. Our communication systems are unreliable. Half our equipment is malfunctioning. Those are excuses, Mortok snapped. We have 4,000 ships against a species that has never fought an interstellar war. The odds are overwhelming in our favor. The odds favor us only if our intelligence is accurate, Admiral Kethvar replied. And this human has demonstrated capabilities far beyond what our studies suggested. If he represents typical human abilities, he cannot, Vexthal said firmly. One small being cannot possess such skills. This must be their elite operative, specially trained for infiltration and sabotage. Taeho almost laughed as he listened to their debate. Even now, after everything he had done, they still couldn't accept the truth about human capabilities. Perhaps, Dr. Rixcon said quietly, we should reconsider our assessment of this species entirely. The room fell silent. The suggestion was unthinkable. The Vorthak Empire did not reconsider. It conquered. Impossible, Vexthal declared. We have studied thousands of species. None have ever demonstrated resistance to our methods. Humans will be no different. But what if they are? Dr. Rixcon persisted. What if this Li Taeho really is an ordinary member of his species? What if 40 billion humans possess similar capabilities? Then we adapt our tactics, General Mortok said. Increase the bombardment phase, use more ships, deploy additional ground forces. Or, Admiral Kethvar said slowly, we find a different species to conquer. The galaxy contains many civilizations. We do not need to risk our fleet against an unknown threat. The suggestion of retreat sent shockwaves through the room. No Vorthak commander had ever suggested avoiding a conquest before. Vexthal's exoskeleton creaked as he rose to his full height. We are the dominant species in this galaxy. We do not flee from primitives who still crawl on planetary surfaces. The invasion will proceed as planned. When? Admiral Kethvar asked. Tomorrow, Vexthal commanded. I want the fleet in human space within 48 hours. This delay ends now. The meeting broke up with reluctant agreement. The invasion would finally begin, despite all the problems and uncertainties. The Vorthak Empire's pride would not allow them to back down. That night, Taeho made his final move. He had been saving the best for last. During his weeks of sabotage, he had discovered something interesting about the High Command Tower's systems. All the building's functions, power, communications, environmental controls, security systems, were coordinated through a single master computer located in the tower's core. The computer was heavily protected, buried deep inside layers of armor and shielding, but it needed to communicate with systems throughout the building, and those communication pathways could be accessed from the ventilation system. Taeho had been planning this attack since his first night in the building. Now, with the invasion fleet preparing to depart, it was time to execute it. He crawled through the familiar ductwork to the computer core level. The chamber was vast, filled with processing units that hummed with the power of an entire planet's worth of computation. This single facility coordinated not just the building's functions but communications for the entire Vorthak Empire. The guards here were more alert than those on the roof, but they were also more tired. Weeks of stress and the hostile environment had worn them down. When Taeho dropped silently behind the first guard, the alien barely had time to register his presence before losing consciousness. The second guard heard the noise and turned to investigate. Taeho met him halfway, moving with the speed and precision of someone who had learned to survive in an environment where hesitation meant death. Alone in the computer core, Taeho approached the master terminal. The system was more complex than anything he had worked with before, but the principles were the same. Every computer needed inputs, outputs, and processing power. Every network had pathways that could be disrupted. Working with the focused intensity he had learned in the asteroid mines, Taeho began his final sabotage. This time, he wasn't making subtle adjustments or introducing minor errors. This time, he was going to cripple the entire system. He started with the communication protocols, rewriting the basic routing algorithms that controlled how messages moved through the network. Then he attacked the security systems, introducing cascading failures that would multiply exponentially. Finally, he corrupted the database structures that held the Empire's records and tactical information. It was delicate work, requiring perfect timing and absolute precision. One mistake would trigger the system's defenses and alert the entire building to his presence. But Taeho had learned patience in the deep mines, where a single wrong move could collapse an entire asteroid. 3 hours later, he was finished. The computer core looked exactly the same as when he had arrived. The processing unit still hummed with power. The display still showed normal operations. Nothing appeared to have changed, but at the deepest levels of the system, a virus was spreading. Not a simple program designed to destroy data, but something much more subtle. A logical infection that would cause the entire Vorthak command network to slowly degrade and fail. Within hours, communication delays would stretch from seconds to minutes. Within days, the delays would become hours. Within weeks, the network would be completely useless, unable to coordinate activities across their vast empire. The Vorthak wouldn't even realize what was happening until it was far too late. Taeho returned to his quarters just as the morning shift arrived to find the unconscious guards. The alarm klaxons wailed through the building once again, but this time there was desperation in their sound. 3 major security breaches in 2 weeks had shattered Vorthak confidence in their own invulnerability. High Commander Vexthul arrived within the hour, accompanied by his entire senior staff and a full company of elite guards. They stormed into Taeho's quarters like an army preparing for battle. Taeho was sitting calmly in his chair by the window, watching the invasion fleet begin its departure from orbital staging areas. Thousands of ships were moving into jump formation, preparing to begin humanity's conquest. "You," Vexthul said, pointing one armored finger at the human. "This ends now." "I'm sorry, Your Excellence." Taeho looked genuinely confused. "What ends?" "Do not pretend innocence. Somehow you have been leaving this room. Somehow you have been sabotaging our systems. I do not know how, but I know it is you." Taeho spread his hands in a helpless gesture. "Your Excellence, I haven't left this room since you brought me here. Your own security systems will confirm that." And they did. The door locks showed no signs of tampering. The windows were intact. The room's sensors had detected no anomalies. According to every piece of evidence, the human prisoner had never left his quarters, but Vexthul was beyond caring about evidence. "Guards," he commanded, "kill him." The elite soldiers raised their weapons, energy rifles that could vaporize a target in milliseconds. Their targeting systems locked onto Taiho's small form. "Wait," Taiho said calmly. Something in his voice made everyone pause. The human was no longer playing the role of frightened prisoner. His posture was relaxed but alert, his eyes clear and calculating. For the first time since his capture, he looked dangerous. "Before you kill me," Taiho said conversationally, "you should know that your invasion is going to fail." "Impossible," Vexthul snapped. 4,000 ships against a primitive species. The outcome is predetermined. "Is it?" Taiho stood up, slowly, his movements fluid and controlled. "Your ships are departing with corrupted navigation data, defective communication systems, and tactical plans riddled with errors.